In tonight's story, we journey to a quiet house wrapped in ivy, where the days move a little slower and the seasons tell a tale of their own. We meet a writer named Alara, whose world is filled with paper and ink, and a gardener named Liam, who speaks the language of the earth. It is a story about patience, about the beauty of things that grow slowly, and how love, like a garden, blooms when you least expect it. So take a deep breath, let go of the day, and let's step into their world. Once upon a time, in a house wrapped in ivy and quiet mornings, there lived a girl named Alara. Her world was made of paper and ink, of coffee cups and rainy Tuesdays. She worked from a small desk overlooking the garden, a garden that had grown wild and unruly, much like her own thoughts. But every Wednesday, at exactly 8 in the morning, the rhythm of the world changed. The rusty iron gate would creak open, and the silence would be filled with the soft sounds of life. His name was Liam. He was the gardener, though he looked less like a worker and more like a part of the earth itself. He arrived with an old green truck and a patience that Alara envied. She would watch him from behind the safety of her curtains. He didn't rush. He moved with the slow, deliberate grace of someone who understood that flowers cannot be forced to bloom. He was 25, just like her, yet he seemed to move in a different time zone entirely. April brought the rain, and with it the first shy interactions. Alara had stepped out to collect the mail, the damp grass soaking her slippers. Liam was there, pruning the hydrangeas. He looked up, his eyes the colour of the moss on the oak tree. He didn't say a word at first. He just tipped the brim of his hat and offered a smile that felt like the sun breaking through the clouds. Alara smiled back, a small fleeting thing before retreating inside. But her heart beat a little faster for the rest of the day. Weeks turned into months. The garden began to transform. Where there were once weeds, now stood proud rows of lavender and foxglove. One Wednesday, Alara found a bouquet of white roses sitting on her porch step. There was no note, just the dew-covered petals and the lingering scent of earth. She watched from the window as Liam drove away, realizing that he had noticed her watching him all along. It was a silent conversation, spoken in the language of petals. July was heavy with heat. The air shimmered above the pavement. Alara saw Liam wiping sweat from his brow, his shirt clinging to his back. Courage is a funny thing. It often arrives when you least expect it. She filled a pitcher with ice and lemons. Stepping out onto the porch, the wooden boards creaking, she called out to him. He approached slowly, taking the glass with dirt-stained hands, careful not to touch hers. "Thank you," he said, his voice deep and rough like tree bark. "I'm Liam." "Alara," she whispered. That glass of lemonade turned into 10 minutes of conversation, then 20. Every Wednesday, Alara would wait for the sound of the gate. They talked about the soil, about how the peonies needed ants to bloom, about books she was reading and the dreams he had of owning his own nursery. They sat on the porch steps, separated by a few feet of space, but connected by an invisible thread that pulled tighter with every laugh, every shared silence. September brought the winds. A fierce storm rolled in on a Wednesday afternoon, trapping Liam in the garden shed. Alara didn't hesitate. She ran out with an umbrella, the wind whipping her hair, and pulled him into the safety of her kitchen. Drenched and shivering, they stood in the warmth of her home. The smell of rain and sage filled the room. He looked at her, water dripping from his hair, and for the first time the distance between them vanished. They fell in love, not with a crash, but the way leaves fall, drifting, spiraling, until they finally settle on the ground. It was in the way he brought her the reddest maple leaf he could find. It was in the way she started wearing the colour green, because it reminded her of him. Wednesday became the only day of the week that mattered. The other 6 days were just waiting rooms for his arrival. Winter means the garden must sleep. On the last Wednesday of November, the trees were bare. Liam finished mulching the beds. He came to the door, twisting his cap in his hands. "I won't be back until spring," he said, the words hanging heavy in the cold air. Alara felt a panic rise in her chest. A winter without him felt like an eternity. But then he stepped forward, brave and terrified, and took her hand. "Unless," he added softly, "you'd like me to visit just to see you." And so the gardener visited the writer not to tend to the earth, but to tend to her heart. They spent the winter indoors. He learned to drink tea. She learned to identify trees by their bark. By the fire, while the snow piled up against the window pane, the once a week became every other day, and then every day. The love that had sprouted in the spring and grown in the summer had now taken deep, unshakable roots in the winter. When spring returned, the garden burst into life with a vibrancy it had never known before. It was reflecting the love of the two people who walked its paths. Under the old oak tree, where they had first exchanged shy waves, Liam knelt down. Not to check the soil, but to ask a question, and Alara, with the sun in her eyes and certainty in her soul, said yes. Years flowed like water in a brook. The writer and the gardener built a life woven together by seasons. They grew old in that house. The garden grew wilder, but so did their love. They learned that patience is the secret to both flowers and relationships. And every Wednesday they would sit by the window, hold hands, and remember the day the rusty gate first creaked open. They lived truly and deeply, happily ever after.